A grease-stained mechanic wipes his hands on a rag. Tired, honest, real. A woman in a broken-down vintage car stares at him. She looks ordinary. "I need a favor," she says. "Can you pretend to be my boyfriend this weekend?" He laughs. "I'm just a guy who fixes engines." "Exactly," she whispers. "That's exactly what I need." He says yes. He thinks it's a small lie for a stranger. But when the limousine arrives, he realizes he didn't just agree to a date. He just stepped into the world of a secret billionaire. Now he must survive the sharks or lose his heart. Jax Miller is a man who understands how the world works, or at least how machines do. At 32, he owns Miller's Garage, a small, cluttered shop on the edge of the city. His life is measured in oil changes, transmission flushes, and the steady hum of a healthy engine. He's tall, built from years of heavy lifting, with a jawline that could cut glass and eyes that have seen too much struggle to be naive. He wears a faded navy coverall with his name stitched in orange thread. He's happy, or he's as happy as a man can be when he's working 80 hours a week to keep his father's legacy alive. The garage is a place of grit and history. Every wrench on the wall has a story, every oil stain a memory of a problem solved. Jax doesn't mind the solitude. In fact, he prefers the company of metal and gears. They don't lie. They don't have hidden agendas. If an engine fails, it's because a part is worn or a connection is broken. You fix the part, you restore the connection, and the world moves again. It's a simple philosophy, but it's one that has kept him sane while the rest of the world seems to be spinning out of control. It's a rainy Tuesday evening, the kind where the sky is a flat, oppressive gray, and the air feels like a damp towel. Jax is just about to pull down the heavy iron shutter when the car rolls in, or rather, limps in. It's a 1967 Mustang, a beautiful machine that should be purring, but instead it's coughing thick, black smoke like a dying dragon. Jax wipes his hands on a red rag and steps out into the drizzle. His professional curiosity instantly piqued. The driver's side door creaks open. A woman steps out. She's wearing a simple oversized sweater, worn-out jeans, and a baseball cap pulled low over her eyes. To Jax, she looks like a grad student having a very bad day, exhausted, slightly disheveled, and completely out of her element in this part of town. Her name, she says, is Elena. "Can you fix her?" Elena asks, pointing at the steaming hood. Her voice is soft, but there's a strange rhythmic authority to it, a cadence that suggests she's used to being listened to, even if she's currently covered in the light mist of a rainstorm. Jax pops the hood. The heat hits his face, smelling of scorched coolant and old oil. He doesn't even need to look for more than 10 seconds. "Blown head gasket. You aren't going anywhere tonight, Elena. It's going to take me at least 3 days to get the parts for a classic like this." Elena sighs, a sound of pure, unadulterated exhaustion. She leans against the brick wall of the garage, looking out at the gray street. She looks lonely. Not the kind of lonely that comes from being alone, but the kind that comes from being surrounded by people who don't actually see you. People who only see what you can provide or what you represent. "I have a family reunion this weekend," she says suddenly, her voice barely audible over the rain. "In the Hamptons. My ex will be there. My parents. They're convinced I'm a failure because I'm not married to a lawyer or a banker. To them, my life is just a series of missed opportunities because I didn't follow the path they laid out for me." Jax chuckles, leaning on the fender. "Parents. They never change, do they? My old man wanted me to be a doctor, a real professional. Now I'm a doctor for cars. He still won't look at my fingernails without a look of pity." Elna looks at Jax, truly looks at him. She sees the grease under his nails, the faint scar on his forehead from a slipping wrench, but she also sees the kindness in his expression. She sees a man who doesn't want anything from her. He's not looking at her watch or her shoes. He's looking at her like a person. "What if," she starts, then pauses, biting her lip. "What if you came with me, just for 48 hours? Pretend to be my boyfriend. I'll pay you, more than you make in a month here." Atana Jax laughs, thinking it's a joke. "Me? Look at me, Elena. I smell like unleaded gasoline and old coffee. Your family would see through me in 5 seconds. I don't know the difference between a salad fork and a fish fork. No, Elena insists, stepping closer, her eyes flashing with a sudden, desperate intensity. That's exactly the point. They expect me to bring someone fake, someone polished and plastic who will agree with everything they say. You're real, you're honest. If you show up with me, they'll be so shocked they'll stop asking questions because they won't know what to say. You're my secret weapon, Jax. Jax looks at his shop. The bills are piling up. The roof needs fixing. The landlord has been calling about the lease. He looks at this ordinary girl who seems so desperate for a little bit of peace, a little bit of protection from the vultures she calls family. He thinks he's helping a fellow underdog. He thinks he's playing a small part in a harmless drama. Keep your money, Jax says, giving her a lopsided, charming grin. But you're buying the coffee on the way there. And if they serve that tiny food on little toothpicks, I'm allowed to ask for a burger. Deal? Elena smiles. It's a bright, dangerous flash of a smile that lights up the dark garage for a split second. Deal, Jax. I'll have a car pick you up Friday at 5. Don't worry about the clothes, just be you. Jax thinks he's going to spend a weekend in a modest beach house, eating potato salad and dodging an annoying ex-boyfriend. He has no idea he just signed an invisible contract with the most powerful woman in the tech industry. He has no idea that by Monday, his life will be irrecoverably changed. As she leaves, Jax stares at the Mustang. He realizes he didn't even ask for her phone number. He just trusted the look in her eyes. It was the same look an engine gives you right before it finally catches, a spark of hope in the dark. Friday at 5 arrives. Jax has prepared as if he's going to a formal inspection. He showered 3 times, scrubbed his hands until they bled to get the stubborn oil out of the creases of his skin, and put on his only decent suit, a charcoal gray number he bought for a cousin's wedding 5 years ago. It's slightly out of style, and the trousers are a bit stiff, but it's clean. He's standing in front of his shop, feeling like a fish out of water, checking his reflection in the window of a parked truck. He expects a taxi, a yellow cab, maybe a rideshare, or maybe Elena's Mustang, fixed and ready. Instead, a black Rolls-Royce Cullinan pulls up. The glass is so dark it looks like obsidian, reflecting the gritty street of the industrial district like a mirror from another world. A driver in a crisp white shirt, black tie, and leather gloves steps out. He doesn't look like a driver. He looks like a Secret Service agent. He walks straight to Jax with military precision. Mr. Miller, Miss Elena is expecting you. Jax's stomach does a slow, heavy roll. The Hamptons is that way, right? He points vaguely toward the highway. The driver doesn't smile. He doesn't even blink. We're going to the private terminal first, sir. Miss Elena prefers to avoid the Friday traffic. The private terminal turns out to be a guarded hangar for Gulfstream jets. Jax sits in the butter-soft leather seat of the Rolls-Royce, his mind racing at 1,000 miles an hour. He sees Elena waiting by the stairs of a plane that looks like it belongs to a head of state. She isn't wearing the oversized sweater anymore. She's in a tailored cream suit that probably costs more than Jack's entire inventory. Her hair is sleek, her eyes hidden behind Chanel sunglasses that reflect the afternoon sun. She looks like a queen returning to her realm. Jax, she says, greeting him with a light kiss on the cheek that smells like jasmine, expensive stationery, and power. You look sharp. The suit is a bit big in the shoulders, but we'll have the tailor fix that before dinner. Elena, Jax says, his voice a bit choked, his eyes wide. What is this? You said a family reunion. You didn't say we were taking a rocket ship to a different planet. This isn't a beach house budget. This is a small country's GDP. Elena takes his hand. Her touch is cool, steady, and strangely grounding. I told you I was a failure in their eyes, Jax. I didn't say I was poor. I'm the CEO of Novacor. To my parents, I'm just the girl who didn't marry a European aristocrat. To the world, I'm the woman who owns the satellites that allow you to use your GPS. I'm the woman who manages the data of half the Fortune 500. Jax wants to turn around. He wants to run back to his garage where the smells are familiar and the stakes are simple. But the stairs are already retracting. The engines are beginning their high-pitched whine. The door seals with a soft, expensive thud. "You said you'd help," she whispers, leaning close, her eyes pleading behind the dark lenses. "Please, just be Jax. The mechanic who told me I had a blown head gasket. The guy who doesn't care about my stock price or my board of directors. I need that guy this weekend. I'm drowning in yes men. I need one no man." The weekend is a blur of high society madness that feels like a fever dream. They arrive at a cottage that is actually a 30-room marble mansion overlooking the Atlantic, complete with manicured gardens and a staff that moves like shadows. Elena's family is already there, gathered on the terrace. They are vultures draped in silk and cashmere. Her mother, Victoria, a woman whose face has been frozen into a mask of permanent disapproval by expensive plastic surgery, looks at Jax's off-the-rack suit and nearly faints into her martini. "And who is this, Elena? A friend from the charity ward?" "This is Jax," Elena says, pulling him close, her arm locking into his with a strength that surprises him. "He's a mechanic. He owns his own business. He's the most honest man I've ever met." The terrace goes silent. The clinking of ice against glass stops. A man in a three-piece Italian suit, Elena's ex, Julian, steps forward with a smirk that doesn't reach his cold, calculating eyes. Julian is the kind of man who measures his worth in the number of zeros on his bonus check. "A mechanic? How quaint. A real salt-of-the-earth type," Julian says, his voice dripping with condescension. "Tell me, Jax, do you find it difficult to understand the complexities of global trade while you're elbow-deep in transmission fluid? Or do you just focus on the shiny bits?" Jax feels the anger flare, a hot spark in his chest, but he remembers Elena's grip on his hand. He feels her trembling slightly. She's not afraid of Julian. She's afraid of being humiliated in front of him again. Jax smiles, the slow, dangerous, confident smile he uses when a shady parts supplier tries to scam him. "Global trade is easy, Julian," Jax says, his voice steady, deep, and carrying across the terrace. "It's just moving parts. You buy low, you sell high, you hope the logistics don't break. But if the engine is rotten, it doesn't matter how fast you're going or how expensive the paint job is. Most people in this room are Ferraris with no engines. Beautiful to look at, but they aren't going anywhere. I prefer things that actually work." Elena's father, a titan of industry with a face like carved granite, raises an eyebrow. For the first time in his life, Julian looks genuinely embarrassed, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. But the night is young and the vultures are hungry. Julian isn't done. Throughout the pre-dinner cocktails, he follows Jax, trying to trip him up. He begins asking technical questions about venture capital, about the recent Novacor merger, about the liquidity crisis in the tech sector. He's trying to prove Jax is a fraud, a puppet Elena hired to spite them. Jax handles it with the brutal common sense of a man who has built things from scratch. He doesn't use big words. He doesn't cite white papers. He uses metaphors about tools, about foundations, about the structural integrity of a bridge. To his surprise, the older guests, the ones who actually built their fortunes instead of inheriting them, start listening. They find his directness refreshing. They find him real. By the time dinner is served in the grand dining room, Jax is the unintended center of attention. He's telling a story about a 1950s truck he restored for a war veteran, a truck that had been sitting in a barn for 40 years. He's talking about the soul of a machine, about the beauty of restoration, about passion over profit. Elena watches him from across the table. Her eyes aren't hidden by sunglasses anymore. They are shining with a mixture of shock and admiration. She realizes she didn't just hire a temporary boyfriend to act as a buffer. She found a man who can stand in a room full of giants and not only refuse to feel small, but actually make the giants look like children. She sees her father leaning in, actually listening to Jax's explanation of how a combustion engine is a lot like a corporate ecosystem. She sees the walls she built around herself starting to crack. For the first time in years, she feels like she can breathe. If you love stories where the underdog shows the elites how it's done, hit that subscribe button right now. You won't believe how Jax handles the final showdown. Saturday night is the grand gala. It's the centerpiece of the weekend. Hundreds of the wealthiest people in the country are gathered in a ballroom lit by 1,000 crystal candles. The air is thick with the scent of lilies and the quiet clinking of gold spoons against porcelain. Jax is now wearing a tuxedo that was hand-delivered by a tailor at 4 a.m. He looks like a movie star. He feels like a spy. He's standing by the balcony, looking out at the dark ocean, when Julian approaches him. Julian is drunk, his face flushed, his eyes narrow with malice. "I know what you are," Julian hisses. "You're a project, a charity case. Elena brought you here to insult us. Do you really think you belong here? Look at your hands, Jax. You can scrub them 100 times, but you'll always be a grease monkey." Jax doesn't look at him. He keeps his eyes on the horizon. "I like my hands, Julian. They've built things. They've fixed things. What have yours done? Signed checks with your father's money?" Julian snarls and reaches for Jax's collar. Jax moves before Julian can even blink. In one smooth motion, Jax catches Julian's wrist and twists it just enough to keep him still. It's the mechanic's grip, firm, undeniable, and painful. "Don't," Jax says. The word is a low vibration that silences the people nearby. Suddenly, the music stops. The ballroom goes quiet. Elena is standing on the small stage in the center of the room. She has a microphone in her hand. Her face is pale, but her eyes are like flint. She's looking straight at her parents, then at Julian, then finally at Jax. "I have an announcement to make," Elena says. Her voice is amplified, echoing off the high ceilings. "For years, I have tried to be the person you wanted me to be. I've tried to marry the right names. I've tried to play the right games. But this weekend, I realized something." She steps down from the stage and walks through the crowd. The freeze moment is absolute. Nobody moves. Nobody breathes. The elite of the city are frozen like statues as the billionaire CEO walks straight to the mechanic. She stops in front of Jax. She reaches out and takes his hand. The hand Julian just insulted. She raises it for everyone to see. "This man is Jax Miller," she says, her voice ringing with pride. "He doesn't have a title. He doesn't have a trust fund. But he has something most of you lost a long time ago. He has character. He has honor. And he is the man I've chosen to be by my side." The silence in the room is deafening. You could hear a pin drop on the marble. Julian looks like he's been slapped. Victoria looks like she's about to have a heart attack. Jax looks at Elena. He sees the fear behind her brave face. He sees the little girl who just wanted someone to see her, not her bank account. He leans in and whispers, loud enough for the front row to hear, "Does this mean I still have to buy the coffee on the way home?" Elena laughs, a real, genuine laugh that shatters the tension in the room. But then, the doors at the back of the ballroom swing open. 2 men in dark suits enter. They aren't guests. They are investigators. They walk straight toward Elena's father. "The board of Novacor has called an emergency session, Miss Elena," one of them says. "There's been an attempted hostile takeover, and it's coming from inside this house." The freeze moment isn't over. It just got a whole lot colder. The gala turns into a war room. Elena is at the center of a hurricane of phone calls, data sheets, and legal threats. It turns out Julian hadn't just been trying to win her back. He'd been working with her father to sell Novacor to a competitor behind her back. They thought she was weak because she was emotional. They thought her mechanic boyfriend was a distraction they could use. They were wrong. Jack stays by her side. He doesn't understand the legal jargon, but he understands people. He watches Julian's face. He watches the father's eyes. "He's bluffing," Jax whispers to Elena during a break. "Look at his hands. He's tapping his ring finger. That's a nervous tick. He doesn't have the votes yet. He's trying to scare you into signing the papers tonight." Elena looks at Julian. Jax is right. She sees the desperation behind the arrogance. She stands up, tears the legal documents in half, and throws them onto the polished floor. "The deal is off, Julian. And Dad, you're fired from the board. Effective immediately." By dawn, the mansion is quiet. The guests have fled. Julian has been escorted out by security. The hostile takeover was crushed in 6 hours because Elena found the strength to say no. Jax is sitting on the porch, watching the sun rise over the ocean. He's taken off his tuxedo jacket. his white shirt unbuttoned at the collar. He looks exhausted. Elena comes out and sits next to him. She's barefoot. She looks like the girl in the oversized sweater again. "You knew," Jack says, looking at her. "You knew they were planning something. That's why you brought me, wasn't it? Not just for a date. You needed a shield." Elena looks at her feet. "At first, yes. I thought if I brought someone unpredictable, it would throw them off their game. But Jax, I didn't expect you to be you. And what is me? Someone who actually cares," she says softly. "Someone who looks at me and doesn't see a CEO. You saw a girl with a broken car. You're the only person in my life who has ever fixed something for me without asking for a piece of my soul in return." Jack stands up. He looks out at the water. "I should go back, Elena. My shop, it's probably a mess, and I have a transmission waiting for me." Elena stands up too. "The Mustang is fixed, by the way. My best engineers worked on it all night. It's in the driveway." Jack smiles. "Good. She's a beautiful car. Treat her right." He starts to walk away, but she grabs his arm. "Wait, Jax, what about us? Was it just a weekend? Was it just a part you were playing?" Jax looks at her, truly looks at her. "I don't play parts, Elena. I'm a mechanic. I either fix things or I don't. And right now, I think we're just getting started." He leans in and kisses her. It's not a CEO and a mechanic kiss. It's just a man and a woman standing on the edge of a new world, while the sun turns the Atlantic to gold. Life doesn't go back to normal. It can't. A week later, Jax is under a dusty SUV in his shop when a familiar Rolls-Royce pulls up. He slides out on his creeper, wiping his face. Elena steps out. She's wearing the oversized sweater again. She has 2 cups of coffee in her hands. "I promised I'd buy the coffee," she says, handing him a cup. "You're late," Jax grins, taking a sip. "It's been 5 days. I had to reorganize a board of directors," she shrugs. "It takes time." She looks around the shop. She looks at the tools, the grease, the hard work. She looks at Jax, who is covered in soot, but has the most honest eyes she's ever known. She hasn't sold Novacore. She hasn't changed who she is, but she has changed her life. She spends her weekends at the garage learning how to change a tire, learning how to breathe. And Jax? He's still the same guy. He still fixes engines. He still refuses her money. But he now has a consultant role at her company. Not for tech, but for human integrity. He's the guy who tells her when her managers are lying. He's the guy who reminds her that at the end of the day, everything is just moving parts. The lesson they learned, and the lesson they tell anyone who will listen, is simple. Status is a coat you put on and take off. Money is just fuel. But integrity is the engine. If you don't have that, you aren't going anywhere, no matter how much you have in the tank. Because sometimes the person who seems to have the least is the only one who can show you what you're actually worth. Jax Miller is still a mechanic. Elena is still a CEO. But together, they are the only 2 people in the city who truly know what it means to be real. And Julian, he's still trying to find someone to fix his car, but no mechanic in the city will take his money. They've all heard the story of the man who tried to break the mechanic and ended up breaking himself. If you believe that true love doesn't care about bank accounts, subscribe now for more stories of real heroes and comment below. Would you date someone with a completely different social status?